The ancient Egyptians built one of the greatest empires in history, and despite facing many difficulties, managed to maintain their sovereignty over almost the entire Nile River Valley. But Africa has always been a gigantic continent, inhabited by many different peoples. Some wanted to conquer the fertile lands of Egypt. Kingdoms and tribes with origins in Libya, Syria, and Turkey were constantly fighting against Egypt. But there were a people whose tenacity and courage frightened even the powerful Egyptians. The Nubians were an African people who lived in the Nubia region in today's Sudan. The Nubian people had been living in that region for a long time. By 3100 BC, there would be Nubian villages along the River Nile. During much of their history, the Nubians did not develop any writing. Much of what we know about them is in the records left by the Egyptians. The Nubia was a region rich in gold veins, semi-precious stones, ebony wood, incense, and ivory. This wide range of resources encouraged the Egyptians to invade that region in search of extremely useful raw materials. The Nubians resisted the Egyptian invasions as much as possible, but they were militarily inferior and were progressively pushed south. Due to the various periods of instability in Egypt, the Nubians were able to organize more effective defenses. During periods of peace, Nubians and Egyptians traded and shared different forms of knowledge. During the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose I, the Nubians were part of the Egyptian Empire, but that dominion quickly collapsed, and the Nubians established a unified kingdom, with Napata as its capital. The Nubians thus founded the Kingdom of Kush, which would become a respected African power. The term Kushite Kingdom comes from the Egyptians, who called the Nubian Kush. The founder of this new kingdom was a tribal leader named Alara, who became king of all the Nubians. With the Kushite kingdom established, the next step was to ensure its defense and economy. For this, Alara's successors reigned successfully, strengthening the kingdom and expanding their domains. The Kushites began to trade with Egypt through the Nile. They also established contact with the Arab kingdoms such as Nabatea and Sheba. The riches of the Kushites were extremely popular. Their leaders, priests, and even farm animals, like horses, were always embellished with pieces of gold and rubies. Over time, and due to the periods of instability in Egypt, the Kushites started to conquer Egyptian cities, including the city of Thebes. At the height of their power, under the command of King Paye, Egypt was fully conquered by the Kushites. King Paye declared himself the champion at the command of the god Amon. He joined his army, warred for over a year against several Egyptians, defeating everyone in his path. The phase of the Kushite and Egyptian history took place during the Third Intermediate Period of ancient Egypt, which began around the year 1070 BC. It is a period also historically known as the Nubian dynasty. The coexistence between Egyptians and Nubians originated marriages between the nobility of the two kingdoms. Both cultures influenced each other in religious and social matters. After consolidating the dominion in Egypt, King Paye returned to the city of Napata, capital of the Kushite kingdom, leaving his brother and successor to rule Egypt and its cities. Egypt remained under Kushite rule until 656 BC, and only weakened due to the Assyrian invasions, which conquered almost all of Egypt, causing turbulent pharaohs' lands. The Assyrians were fearsome warriors, much superior militarily. They already used iron weapons and armor, besides siege weapons and a well-trained cavalry. The Kushite rulers had to retreat to Napata. Sometime later, they founded the city of Meroe further south. Meroe became the new capital of the Kushite kingdom. The Kushite rulers adopted the Egyptian custom of erecting pyramids, being buried in those built in the city. During this period, the Kushites began to develop their writing, the Meroitic script. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus claimed that the Kushite kings reigned until they received an order from the priests of the Golden Temple. When this happened, they committed suicide and passed the power to the next sovereign. This strange custom lasted until the reign of the leader Ergomenes, different from most of his compatriots. He was an educated man, having studied with Greek teachers and learned philosophy. When Ergomenes was ordered to commit suicide, he was furious. He sent his soldiers to the temple to kill the priests, putting an end to this custom. Women also had important roles in Kushite society, having an active voice in everyday matters. For several times, Kushite queens reigned without the interference of male companions. There are even reports of Kushite women who fought in battles and commanded troops. The king's mother was given the title of Candace, which means Queen Mother. She was the king and queen's advisor. On some occasions, she participated in political negotiations and could even take full command. One of these powerful women, and perhaps the bravest of her people, was Amani Shaketo, who reigned in Kush when Rome had already conquered Egypt after the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Rome demanded that the kingdom of Kush pay tribute to the Republic. Amani Shaketo did not accept this demand and considered it an offense, declaring war against Rome. Her soldiers advanced to pillage Egyptian cities under Roman rule. In 24 BC, the Kushites sacked the cities of Aswan, Philae, and Elephantine. They returned to Kush with prisoners, valuable objects, and Roman statues. Even the head of the statue of the Roman Emperor Augustus was taken by Amani Shaketo in a gesture of contempt against the enemy. Upon learning this, Augustus sent Roman general Petronius and his soldiers to punish the Kushites. There are few details about the battle, but Petronius may have said that the Kushites had more than 30,000 warriors and were fighting with frightening fury. Amani Shaketo was described as a corpulent and rough woman. She led her troops and became blind in one eye and being wounded by a Roman. After more than 3 years of fighting, the Romans finally proposed a peace agreement. In the year 20 BC, Romans and Kushites signed a peace treaty. The Roman emperor recognized the kingdom of Kush as an independent power without being obliged to pay taxes to Rome. The kingdom of Kush lasted until AD 350, but due to a lack of resources and trade, the kingdom was very weakened and dispersed. The once rich and proud Kushite kingdom ended up dominated by the Aksum Empire, which expanded its borders from the region of Ethiopia. The Kushites were an incredible people with brave warriors, skilled craftsmen, and wise merchants. Their history shows us the strength and perseverance of the African people, capable of repelling even the powerful Roman Empire.
The Kingdom of Aksum, also known as the Aksumite Empire, was an ancient state that flourished in the region that currently includes Eritrea and the northern part of Ethiopia. The kingdom was of great economic and political importance in East Africa, one of the first African states to adopt Christianity as its official religion. The Kingdom of Aksum was founded around the 1st century AD by the Semitic peoples of the region. The fertile agricultural land allowed the inhabitants of northern Ethiopia to cultivate and trade wheat, barley, and millet, as well as raising goats and sheep. This trade network included links with Egypt to the north and southern Arabia. Wealth acquired through trade and military power added to this prosperous agricultural foundation. By the end of the 1st century, a single king came to replace a confederation of tribal chieftains, forging a united kingdom that would dominate the Ethiopian highlands for the next 6 centuries. The Kingdom of Aksum peaked between the 3rd and 6th centuries AD. The kingdom's location was strategic, as it stood at the crossroads of trade routes that connected the Red Sea to the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. This allowed Aksum to become an important trading center, exporting products such as ivory, gold, spices, incense, and even slaves. Traditionally, the Kingdom of Aksum was ruled by a king with vast political and religious power. The monarch was considered a direct descendant of the legendary King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, which gave his rule a divine legitimacy. Besides the king, there was an aristocracy with great power and wealth, and a system of serfdom that allowed the rural population to work the land in exchange for protection and benefits. During the 4th century AD, the Nubians, who had previously formed the Kingdom of Kush with its capital at Meroe, attacked the Kingdom of Aksum. This dispute was over control of the regional ivory trade. The King of Aksum, Ezana I, responded to the attack with great military might, plundering the city of Meroe. The once powerful Nubia, now in serious decline and weakened, was promptly conquered and divided into 3 states: Faras, Dongola, and Soba. This collapse allowed the Kingdom of Aksum to dominate the entire region. One of the greatest achievements of the Kingdom of Aksum was the adoption of Christianity as the official religion in the 4th century AD. According to tradition, King Azana I converted to Christianity after having a dream in which an angel gave him this command. The Christian conversion was a crucial factor in the kingdom's unification, as it now had a single religious identity, distinguishing itself from its Muslim neighbors. Christianity also brought new forms of art and architecture, such as the famous rock-hewn churches that are still a symbol of Ethiopia today. They are an example of the mastery of Aksumite architects in carving monumental structures in stone, creating sacred spaces that are still considered landmarks of Christian architecture today. These churches, which date back to the 4th and 5th centuries AD, include the Church of St. George in Lalibela and the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Tigray. Judaism also had a substantial impact on the Kingdom of Aksum. A group of people from the region known as Beta Israel or Ethiopian Jews adhered to the beliefs and practices set out in the Torah, the scroll that makes up the first 5 holy books of the Jewish religion. Although the scriptures and prayers are written in the Ge'ez alphabet rather than Hebrew, the religion shares a common ancestry with modern Judaism. The Kingdom of Aksum also played a key role in the history of African writing, having created its own Ge'ez alphabet used to pen religious texts and official documents. Ge'ez influenced the writing of other peoples in the region, such as the Amharic people, who still use an adapted form of this alphabet today. The decline of the Kingdom of Aksum had multiple causes, among them the changing of trade routes and the weakening of trade with the Middle East and India, pressure from invading peoples from southern and eastern Africa, and the loss of power of the kings at the expense of the aristocracy. The end of the kingdom is generally dated to the 10th century AD, when it was overrun by the Agao and Zagwe peoples. The legacy of the Kingdom of Aksum can be seen today in Eritrea and Ethiopia, countries that have inherited some of this culture and traditions. For example, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is a continuation of the Christian tradition established by the Aksumites. The Amharic language spoken in Ethiopia originates from the Ge'ez alphabet. In addition, the history of the Kingdom of Aksum is celebrated in traditional festivals and ceremonies in the region, such as Timkat, commemorating the baptism of Jesus Christ in the Jordan River. One of Aksum's most famous landmarks is the Obelisk of Aksum, one of the tallest in the ancient world. There are also other obelisks and stelae that bear witness to the greatness of the city at its peak. These structures are made of large stone blocks and embellished with inscriptions in ancient Ethiopian languages. Also, Aksum is known for the place that housed the kingdom's rulers. The site is an important tourist and archaeological attraction. Many visitors go to Aksum to explore the ruins and learn about its enthralling history. Established in the 13th century in West Africa, the Mali Empire became one of the most successful and influential empires in the region. Arising from the rich lands of the Niger River, it grew under the leadership of notable kings such as Sundiata Keita and Mansa Musa. At its peak, Mali not only ruled over vast territories, but also became a crucial pillar in trans-Saharan trade, especially in gold, salt, and other valuable goods. The Mali Empire came from complex origins, profoundly rooted in the changing dynamics of West African societies and in the transformations that occurred before the empire itself emerged. Prior to the rise of the Mali Empire, the Ghana Empire was the main force in the West African region. This ran a dominant role in trans-Saharan trade, but began to decline in the 11th century as a result of internal and external circumstances, including pressure from nomadic groups and perhaps overexploitation of resources. The origin of the Mali Empire is closely tied to the Mandinka people and the tale of Sundiata Keita, a semi-legendary leader who is often portrayed in oral traditions as a hero of his people. He belonged to the Keita clan of the Mandinka ethnic group. According to the popular story called the Sundiata Epic, which is often passed on by storytellers, Sundiata faced great hardships in childhood. Born lame, he could not walk until later in his youth, according to tradition. Following his father's death, King Nari Magan Konate, Sundiata and his mother were sent into exile due to the machinations of Queen Sasuma Barete and her son, who saw Sundiata as a contender for the throne. During his exile, Sundiata acquired experience, allies, and prestige. He was called back to his homeland to free the Mandinka people from the tyrannical rule of King Sumaro Kante of the Zulu Kingdom. During the Battle of Karina in 1235, Sundiata defeated Sumaro and established the foundations of the Mali Empire. Sundiata set up Mali as a federation of tribes and cities under a single authority. He brought in laws known as the Constitution of Kurakan Fuga, which laid down the rules of government, social rights, and good governance practices. Mali expanded under his leadership, controlling important trade routes and cities. Sundiata also set up the capital in the city of Niani. Led by Sundiata and his successors, the empire expanded rapidly, absorbing large areas of present-day Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Niger, and other surrounding territories. In its heyday, it was one of Africa's richest and largest empires, based on the trans-Saharan trade in gold, salt, copper, slaves, and other goods. The area where the Mali Empire was founded was wealthy in resources, especially gold. Sundiata and his successors' savvy in controlling and taxing the gold trade routes meant that the empire could amass wealth and expand its territory. Mansa Musa was one of the most famous leaders of the Mali Empire. Under his reign, it reached its peak in wealth, territory, and influence. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to the city of Mecca in 1324 is fabled, not least for the vast amount of gold he distributed along his journey, destabilizing local economies for a short time. Mansa Musa also became a leading patron of the arts and education. He commissioned the construction of the great Djingueber Mosque in Timbuktu, one of the most prominent cities in the Mali Empire, which became a central hub of Islamic learning. Timbuktu's University of Sankore was one of the most prestigious of its time, attracting scholars from all over Africa and the Middle East. The griots, or bards, had an essential role in preserving and passing on history and traditions. They were highly respected and acted as storytellers, musicians, and advisors. Malian architecture, especially the building of mosques such as the Great Mosque of Djenné, is outstanding. There was also a strong tradition of wood carving and metalwork. Malian society was hierarchical, distinguishing clearly between the nobility, merchants, craftsmen, farmers, and slaves. The Mansa, or king, topped the hierarchy. Mali's economy was boosted by trans-Saharan trade. Mali's well-established commercial routes and strategic location made it extremely prosperous. Although the Mali Empire embraced Islam as its main religion, this adoption was frequently syncretic. Many of Mali's rulers, notably the famous Mansa Musa, were devout Muslims. Many traditional African practices and beliefs continued to thrive alongside Islam. Malians often practice Islam in combination with local beliefs, such as the worship of ancestral spirits. One of West Africa's largest kingdoms, the Mali Empire experienced several military clashes during its existence to expand, consolidate, and defend its territories. During Mansa Musa's reign from 1312 to 1337 and that of his successors, the Mali Empire frequently came into conflict with the Mosi kingdoms to the south. While Mali managed to repel raids and maintain their influence, they never managed to completely subdue the Mosi. In the late 14th and early 15th centuries, the rising Songhai Empire, previously a Malian vassal, began to challenge the Malian Empire's rule in certain regions, especially around Timbuktu and Gao. The Songhai Empire forces, commanded by Soni Ali, seized the city of Timbuktu, greatly reducing Mali's influence in the region. The Mali Empire's collapse followed a combination of internal and external factors that undermined its influence and power in the West African region. The Songhai Empire started to expand in power and influence. The Tuaregs in the north frequently invaded and took over areas controlled by Mali, undermining its influence in the Sahara region. Added to these events, the Mali Empire faced numerous internal power struggles and succession squabbles that greatly enfeebled the central administration. With time, the peripheral regions of the empire started to seek more autonomy, weakening the central power of the king. The decline in control over the trans-Saharan trade routes, partially as a result of the rise of other powers and changes in trade routes, meant that less wealth flowed into the empire. While Mali was overwhelmingly Muslim, The influence of Islam grew deeper and more orthodox with the expansion of Islamic learning. This, at times, led to strains with traditional practices and beliefs. As new trade routes developed, particularly those that skirted the Sahara and focused more on the African coast, Mali's prominence as a trading center began to wane. These factors in combination over the course of the 15th and early 16th centuries meant that Mali lost its position as the main regional power. Its territory splintered, with many areas either becoming independent or coming under the control of the Songhai or other forces. Towards the end of the 16th century, the remnants of the Mali Empire had been limited to its original heartland around the capital in the city of Niani. Soon, even this area became vulnerable to attacks and raids. The Mali Empire has been one of the largest and most influential civilizations in African history, having a key role to play in the rise of Islam, the fostering of education, and the trans-Saharan economy. The Mali Empire is also known for its rich cultural tradition, literature, and contributions to science and learning, influencing many of the empires and kingdoms that emerged in West Africa in subsequent centuries. The Ghana Empire, otherwise known as the Empire of Gold, was an ancient civilization that thrived in West Africa between the 4th and 13th centuries AD. This powerful empire had a major role to play in West African history, establishing itself as an important trading and cultural hub, while its complex and sophisticated society had an enduring regional legacy. The Ghana Empire's roots are steeped in mystery and legend, with the bulk of historical knowledge stemming from oral and archaeological records and the writings of Arab travelers of the time. The Ghana Empire was in what is now southeastern Mauritania and western Mali. It established itself as a cluster of chiefdoms, which eventually became unified under a central leadership. The term Ghana traditionally means the title of the ruler, rather than the name of the empire itself. The empire's name and the area it covered were different from the current nation of Ghana. Oral tradition holds that the establishment of the empire was ascribed to a mythical figure called Dinga Sisa. According to some traditions, Dinga Sisa is portrayed as a semi-divine or heroic figure, with supernatural abilities that allowed him to assert his leadership and found the empire. During the 1st centuries AD, when trans-Saharan trading picked up momentum, the North African Berbers and later the Arabs built up contacts with the region. The accounts of these travelers provide some of the first written references to the Ghana Empire. These encounters partly influenced the growth and consolidation of the empire. The Ghana Empire's geographical location meant that it could control the trans-Saharan trade routes. The region abounded in gold, and controlling this precious resource, along with the opportunity to mediate between the northern salt-producing areas and the southern gold-producing regions, positioned the Empire of Ghana as a dominant trading force. As it grew in wealth and influence, the Ghana Empire started to annex neighboring territories and subdued various ethnic groups and tribes, cementing its position as the region's dominant empire. Society in the Ghana Empire was structured hierarchically, topped by the king, known as the Kayamagan. The nobility, wealthy merchants, artisans, farmers, and slaves were underneath him. The king enjoyed near absolute power and was considered a semi-divine figure. He oversaw maintaining order, justice, and the well-being of the kingdom. Although the king's power was highly centralized, there was a well-established bureaucracy to help run the empire. The conquered territories were ruled by appointed governors, whereas the central territories were more closely administered. The main city and capital of the empire is believed to have been Kumbai Sala, an important trading and political center. In fact, it was divided into two parts, a royal area and a commercial district, with the latter predominantly held by Muslim merchants. Whilst traditional African beliefs prevailed in the Ghana Empire, Islam also had a strong foothold, especially among the elite and merchants. This targeted acceptance of Islam allowed the Empire of Ghana to develop favorable trade relations with North African Muslim states. This coexistence of African traditions and Islamic influences in Ghana made for a diverse and prosperous society, where trade and diplomacy were as important as tradition and religion. The social and political legacy of the Ghana Empire continues to be a crucial piece of West Africa's complex tapestry of history. The Ghana Empire was a dominating authority in West Africa for several centuries, and was often embroiled in military campaigns, whether defensive or expansionist. Towards the end of the 11th century, the Almoravids, a Berber religious and military movement from the Sahara, started to expand southwards. It is widely acknowledged that some kind of clash or series of skirmishes took place between the Almoravids and the Ghanaian Empire, but the specific details are the subject of debate among historians. Some believe that the Almoravids did invade and occupy Ghana, while others argue that their impact was more mercantile and religious than military. The consensus, however, is that these confrontations with the Almoravids and the subsequent commercial developments contributed to the gradual decline of the Ghana Empire. As well as the Almoravids, other burgeoning groups and empires in the region, such as the Mali Empire, started to exert pressure on Ghana. Eventually, Mali in particular overshadowed Ghana in power and influence in West Africa. The decline and subsequent demise of the Ghana Empire did not stem from a single event, but rather from several internal and external factors that took place over the course of centuries. The Ghana Empire's economic system depended heavily on the trade in gold and salt. As time went by, new trade routes began to emerge, undermining the role of the Ghanaian Empire as a crucial go-between. Evidence has shown that climate change may have affected the region, with the Sahara Desert spreading, rendering some areas less hospitable and impacting on agriculture and trade. The gradual embrace of Islam by the elite and merchants influenced the empire's political and social dynamics. Whilst Islam offered a bridge to North Africa, it also brought new ideas and practices that may have upended established traditions and governance in Ghana. The Ghana Empire had been effectively supplanted by the rising Mali Empire by the end of the 13th century. Whilst the Ghana Empire no longer existed as a dominant political entity, its political and social legacy continues to be a crucial part of West Africa's fascinating and fertile history. Located in what is today the South African province of KwaZulu-Natal, the Zulu Kingdom was once a mighty African entity that distinguished itself by its swift ascent and its contributions to African culture and history. Guided by the charismatic and military-savvy King Shaka, the Zulus excelled in innovative warfare and solid organization against European invaders. The Zulu Kingdom's roots lie deep in complex interactions and migrations of multiple tribes and clans in the southern African region. Preceding the rise of the Zulu Kingdom, the region known today as KwaZulu-Natal was populated by several small clans and groups. The Nguni, an ethno-linguistic group to which the Zulus belong, migrated to this region from more northernly areas in southern Africa over several centuries. Originally, the Zulu clan was not especially powerful or distinct from the different Nguni groups. In fact, they were a small clique, led by a chief named Senzangakona. Shaka, who would become the most famous Zulu leader, was born in around 1787. He was the son of Senzangakona and Nandi, a woman from the Lungeni clan. Owing to having been born out of wedlock, Shaka and his mother were ostracized and endured a great deal of hardship during his childhood, having to live in several clans. Shaka and his mother endured rejection and adversity in several places during their youth, before finding shelter with Chief Dingiswayo of the Mthithwa clan. Under Dingiswayo's guidance, Shaka developed into an important warrior. When Senzangakona died, Shaka, aided by Dingiswayo, returned and took over the leadership of the Zulu clan, cementing his power and launching a series of military reforms that would transform the clan into a leading force. Shaka started using new combat techniques and weapons such as the Ikulwa, a short spear with a broad blade, better adapted to hand-to-hand combat than traditional throwing spears. He also introduced the large shield and revamped the tactical combat formation known as the ox horns, where experienced warriors made up the core of the formation, while younger warriors shaped the side horns to surround and flank the enemy using a pincer formation. Shaka consolidated power and spread the clan's territory, either incorporating or displacing other groups in the region. Through his innovations and territorial sprawl, the Zulu clan became the Zulu Kingdom, one of Southern Africa's largest and most powerful nations during the first half of the 19th century. The expansion and displacement led to the phenomenon known as Mifekane, meaning the crushing, leading to several wars and migrations involving multiple ethnic groups in southern Africa. But Shaka was murdered in 1828 by his half-brothers Dingane in Malangana. Dingane seized the throne after Shaka's assassination. His reign was marred by substantial turmoil. He attempted to entrench his power by wiping out would-be rivals and established his new capital at Umgungundlovu. During Dingane's reign, the Zulus found themselves at odds with the Voortrekkers, Dutch-speaking settlers who traveled in wagon trains from the Cape Colony to the southern African interior, starting in 1836, looking to live beyond the Cape's British colonial administration. The well-known Battle of Blood River in 1838 saw a small group of Voortrekkers fend off an attack by a much larger Zulu army. The Voortrekkers' triumph was a turning point, and Dingane was forced to retreat. Following internal and external disputes in 1840, Mpande, Shaka's other half-brother, defied Dingane and, supported by the Voortrekkers, overthrew him. Mpande reigned for almost 30 years, and this was a time of relative peace and stabilization for the Zulu Kingdom. Ketshweo, Mpande's son, took over as king in 1872. His tenure was best characterized by his confrontation with the British Empire. The Zulu and the British entered into conflict in the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879. This war was particularly noteworthy both for the Zulus' astounding military performance, which meant they temporarily defeated one of the world's most powerful colonial powers, and for the British resolve to annex and control the Zulu region as part of their South African colonial strategy. The British Empire was bent on consolidating the many independent states and republics established by the Dutch-speaking inhabitants of the Cape Colony, along with other native nations under its control. This resulted in a confederation policy that jeopardized the Zulu Kingdom's sovereignty. On January 22, 1879, the Battle of Isandlwana produced one of the greatest losses suffered by the British during the colonial wars, as a Zulu army commanded by Ntsingweo Koja decisively defeated the British forces. Employing bullhorn tactics, the Zulu army encircled and overwhelmed the British contingent, inflicting heavy casualties on the European invaders. In the wake of their defeat at Isandlwana, a small British detachment managed to successfully defend the Rorke's Drift mission against a large Zulu force. Their efforts were outstanding, and 11 Victory Crosses were awarded to the defenders. The British bolstered their troops after these initial clashes and conducted a series of incursions into Zulu territory. On July 4, 1879, the Battle of Ulundi became the final and defining engagement of the Anglo-Zulu War. Following the shock British defeat at the Battle of Isandlwana and the successful defense of Rorke's Drift, the British drew significant reinforcements from Britain and its colonies. They were adamant to complete the campaign against the Zulus and cement their control over the territory. Under Frederick Thesiger, 2nd Baron Chelmsford, the British army drew close to Ulundi, the Zulu royal capital. He led a force of around 5,000 men, including infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Against them was the Zulu army, consisting of around 15,000 warriors, under the command of King Setshwayo. The British, realizing the Zulus' ability to quickly encircle their forces, established a large defensive square with infantry and artillery. The cavalry was stationed outside the square to provide a rapid attack unit. The Zulu warriors boldly advanced against the British square. Nevertheless, coming under intense fire from the infantry and artillery, they took significant casualties. The British cavalry followed up with a string of attacks against the Zulu lines, adding to the losses. The battle ultimately resulted in a decisive British victory. The Zulu army was scattered, and Ulundi was burned to the ground. This remarkable rout effectively ended the organized Zulu resistance against the British. The Ulundi defeat spelled the end of the Zulu Kingdom as an independent entity. King Chetshwayo was captured in August 1879 and went into exile. The Zulu Kingdom was split into 13 smaller monarchies to curb the power of the Zulu nation and hinder any further rebellions. But this only resulted in more regional upheaval. The Zulu Kingdom was finally annexed to the British colony of Natal in 1887. The last major Zulu uprising against British rule was the 1906 Bambatha Rebellion. While the riot was suppressed, it remains a symbol of Zulu resistance against colonial rule. The Zulu Kingdom made its mark on southern African history. The Zulus are now South Africa's largest ethnic group, and KwaZulu-Natal is still a vital region. The Zulu Kingdom's history is both one of resistance against colonization and a prime example of the complexity and dynamics of pre-colonial African states.